Okay, here we are, November 4th. It's a Sunday. Daylight savings time just kicked on. So I'm a little out of whack in my mind at the moment. Um, if you take well, actually, you're adding an hour of sleep, I guess, which I'm always all for. But anyway, um, most people are putting out episodes these days, as the final push towards the midterms, the midterm election. Twitter's a place, typically a place of total madness, and right now you can't even go anywhere on there without seeing "Vote Red" or "Vote Red to Save America." It's never going to be trending on Twitter because Jack Dorsey is a douche and doesn't like to put those things on there. Instead, what you'll see as trending is something like "Kill all the Jews" or something like that. Um, to which I believe they finally took that down and gave some sort of half-hearted apology for. But it is ironic that in the wake of the Tree of Life massacre in Pittsburgh, that one of the top trending topics on Twitter, a place that has banned conservatives like Alex Jones and temporarily Laura Loomer, Milo Yiannopoulos, and others, that one of the top trending um, items on there would be "Kill all the Jews." But anyway, this episode, instead of doing the normal, well, I want to say first, when I first started doing this, I never intended for this to be a political podcast in the sense of the word that maybe not what you're thinking, but in my mind, it wasn't supposed to be. I wanted to address cultural themes, and obviously politics does get tied up into that. But I wanted to address the culture and cultural issues and Christianity and how our Judeo-Christian values relate to what is going on in the culture today. That's what I wanted this to be mostly about. Um, as it's turned out, be that as it may, I don't I feel like the midterms are so important and so critical. Usually, I don't like people using that kind of terminology for elections. It's sensationalism, sensationalistic to say that. I mean, when Obama was running for president, he touted this as the change we all need. If we don't get it, we're going to crumble. Of course, that never happened, and he didn't really change anything, certainly not in a positive way. Um, but all the sensationalism and everything that's gone into these midterm elections, I think, definitely are an appropriate characterization of what is going on. The elections are supremely important to the future of the certainly the relative near future of the country and long term as well. If the Democrats get the House, uh, they have to start an impeachment process on Donald Trump. If they win the Senate, you can say goodbye to any kind of forward momentum, even if he does stay in office. Um, the key thing is keeping the gavel out of Nancy Pelosi's hands. Okay. But I don't want to use this. Like I said, most people are using their podcasts and their shows on YouTube and everything as a final push towards the midterms, and that's fine if they want to do that. I'm just as passionate as they are that the Republicans need to keep their majorities in the House and Senate. It's imperative. It's necessary, especially if we want to get out of this mess of Mueller and the Russian probe, the witch hunt that is total nonsense. Um, I don't want to go into all that, but anyone who knows anything about what's going on these days, we're not going to convince anybody by one podcast episode before the midterms. I just don't see that happening. People are pretty entrenched right now. You have the passionate supporters of Donald Trump and the Republicans. They're not going to cross over to the blue. You have the passionate liberal, progressive left. They're not crossing over to the red. And you have middle America right now who's either confused by all this, angered by it, or will just probably vote for the party that they see as the one that will calm things down in the near future. And biases aside, I think that very much is the Republican Party, because if the Democrats do take the House or the Senate, they're going to start an impeachment process on Donald Trump. Any kind of dirt on him they're going to bring up. Um, Women have accused him of all sorts of sexual inappropriate behavior in the past. What happened with Kavanaugh is just a entree to the main course of what will happen with Donald Trump should Nancy Pelosi's ancient gnarled hands wrap themselves around the gavel again. Um, let's put all that to the side, though. I'll be watching it just as with as much intense focus as anybody else, believe me. And I will step outside the front door and shoot myself with a 1776 muzzle-loaded revolver. Should Nancy Pelosi's ancient gnarled hands wrap themselves around the gavel again, um, i.e., if the Dems win, I'm going to commit suicide. So if you want to keep me alive, vote red. Most people probably don't care, so that probably wasn't the best way to convince anybody. Anyway, this episode, instead, what I wanted to focus on is what I intended this thing to be about from the very beginning, which is free speech. Um, there's been an intense focus on what really is free speech and what it encompasses and what it doesn't encompass. With social media today, you have Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all owned by these big corporations, all created within the Silicon Valley umbrella. The liberal progressive mindset runs these organizations, these platforms. They are private entities. I don't really want to get into the whole debate that has been going on with them on whether they are legally allowed to censor conservatives. There's no denial by any of them. And if they do deny it, Zuckerberg or Dorsey or, well, I guess Zuckerberg also owns Instagram. But if they deny that there was a bias against conservatives, that's outright laughable now. So, and Jack Dorsey, the owner of Twitter, the creator of Twitter, the CEO, basically admitted that it was laughable that they weren't that they were a platform that outright supported all ideas and were a platform for all people. He said that was laughable now. That's basically what he said. So, and then of course there's an issue over whether now censoring conservatives actually is taking away your First Amendment rights. I'm probably not going to be a popular one for this opinion, but I do think there is some large merit, there is some substantial merit to the defense that Dorsey and Zuckerberg put forth, that they are private companies, and as such, they can indeed do what they want with their platforms. It actually, I mean, it's more complicated than that, so I understand the other side. But I do think that there is some merit to that argument, that they own these companies and they can therefore decide who and what can be spoken about on their platforms, on their company platforms. Now, like I said, it is more complicated than that. For example, Twitter banned Roger Stone. Roger Stone's in the process of suing Twitter right now. The interesting part about it is he wasn't just deplatformed. He wasn't just banned from Twitter. He had a contract with them, and they were promoting his tweets and promoting, I guess, his website, Stone Cold Truth, and other such paraphernalia or whatever Roger Stone has going on. But I mean, so that brings up the question of whether they violated a contract with him by doing that, whether they, through their bias and through their censorship, actually violated a written contract with Roger Stone that involved money, them promoting him. He had certainly had to have paid them some money to be doing all this. Maybe they refunded it, maybe they didn't. But that's just a kind of an example of how these things are not as cut and dry as they really are. As some people try to make them sound. So it's really not so easy to say, well, they're just taking away your First Amendment. I can understand that. I can understand why people would think that Roger Stone, they're trying to ban him. Certainly they are. If you're looking at the letter of the law, I think that's where this gets complicated, as I'm saying, the letter of the law. Now, the spirit of the law, what's really going on here, the hearts of these people and what they're doing, what they're trying to do, there's no denial. There's no debate. They are cohesively uh, through coordination trying to censor and ban conservative thought and ideas and speech. There's no denying that. So if you're talking about the spirit of the law, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter are rank abusers of the First Amendment. They are trying to take away, without question, the First Amendment rights of many conservatives out there, from Diamond and Silk to Milo Yiannopoulos to Roger Stone. Most famously recently, Alex Jones, Gavin McInnes, the list goes. Laura Loomer was banned not too long ago for a little while from Facebook and Twitter. Actually, I think she's on suspension from Twitter right now, coincidentally, right before the midterms. Um, and these things aren't coincidental. They're not. Um, that Laura Loomer, who does her whole Loomer thing, where she'll go and she just kind of harassed Michael Avenatti, the creepy porn lawyer, and I mean, she makes a career out of, kind of going and being real confrontational with people about their hypocrisies and their lies. She did it to James Comey during his book tour, asking him, about his prison sentence and, all these things that he lied about, his memos and everything that were actually just coming out. He wasn't even aware that they were out at the point. So actually, he just learned about it when Laura Loomer screamed at him at his book conference or at his book signing at a Borders or something. But that's what she does. She did it to Maxine Waters as well. Um, and she, you can argue the merits of what it is that she does. You can go watch her videos for yourself. I think she's with Big League Politics. Um, but I mean, it's undeniable that she has a large following online of people that watch and listen to her, watch her videos and listens to her speak, and she has some influence. So it's not coincidental that they suspended her from Twitter, for a period of time that just so happened to encompass the midterms. Um, Milo Yiannopoulos' Facebook page goes on and off online all the time. Gavin McInnes is banned from Facebook and Twitter. I don't think he's on Instagram, but and then famously Alex Jones. So as I said, the spirit of the law, it's very clear that this is a systematic, coordinated attempt to stifle and remove conservative speech. Now the courts will have to decide, of course, and there also is something that I'm not very well read up on would be the difference between being I guess, a social media platform or a publisher of ideas, in which case you're responsible for everything that is published on your website. That's what Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are trying to avoid being, because then they would be legally responsible for each and every post that anybody has ever made on their website. So if they become publishers, then they're doomed. Um, I don't know much about that debate and that argument. I know that there's people that use that to say that, you're either one or the other. You're either a platform that promotes all ideas and free speech, or you're a publisher. So I mean, it is a complicated issue. But so many big names have been either temporarily or permanently suspended and banned from Facebook, Twitter, and what's the other stupid one? Instagram. Um, and in response to that, there have been other social media sites that have promoted free speech. The most notorious and famous now of all of them has been GAB. Um, I don't, and there's an article actually that encapsulates. Well, first off, GAB was made just with the idea of promoting free speech, and it quickly became a haven for people that were banned from particularly Twitter and Facebook. Um, it just so happened that a lot of those people were racist. Um, you've definitely, I'm sure by this point, heard about GAB in the news because Cowers, I think his name was Robert Cowers, the mass shooter at the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh, was a member of GAB, the social media platform, and he posted, because of their dedication to free speech and their leniency with policing posts on the site, he got away for a long time with writing violent rhetoric and very threatening rhetoric, and he posted a few things that like led directly up to the shooting itself, saying, "Yeah, okay, I'm done talking now, and now I'm going in," basically. Um, so a lot of people that put a lot of people, right away angry, condemning GAB itself. Never mind that there are, like I said at the beginning of this broadcast, not till up until 2 weeks ago, "Kill the Jews" was trending on Twitter, one of the top trending, um, whatever you call it, on Twitter. It was trending at the the top of Twitter. I don't know much about Twitter. I use it, but I hate it. And I swore for a long time I would never tweet. So, it makes me sick. Anyway, but there's, it's I don't have a problem with the fact that there were so many racists on GAB. I was a member of GAB, and now I've never been banned from Twitter. I'm definitely shadow banned on there. Um, I know that they have different tests that you can run to tell whether you're shadow banned or whatever, and I ran my name. I've run it more than once. I am shadow banned on Twitter, and that's no surprise. The stuff I put out there, um, the mainstream liberal progressive media, just I'm abomination. I'm deplorable to them. So yes, I'm shadow banned, and on Facebook, I'm sure that there's a hell of a lot of algorithm, whatever, that limits my reach on there as well. I have a Woke Nation Facebook page. And when I did notice that when I first started it up, I got a lot more reach than I do now. So I think as they realized what it was that I was putting out there and reposting, and every once in a while I'll write an article and put it on there. I put my podcasts on there when I have a new one. This one here will be posted on there. When they see that, and they kind of got an idea of what it is that I'm doing, you saw the reach drop dramatically, not even close to what it used to be. Um, but on Gab and these other places, you kind of get into a little bubble like anybody does with talking to each other. They kind of think you sometimes fall into the trap when you're in these bubbles of thinking that the whole world thinks like you do. And so sometimes when you break out of that, it's a shock to realize like how biased and some people are when they're looking on the outside, looking in on you. There's an article in Vanity Fair that's talking about GAB, and I really wanted to kind of just go over this real quickly. It came out right after the Tree of Life shootings, and it kind of like encapsulates the just the really misinformed, biased, and just bad, very bad. I don't know if it's completely dishonest, but it's uninformed and just poor journalism. Just a lack of information. I don't know whether it's a lack of research or the research that they did do was to the wrong people. But just when you see the perspective that the mainstream media comes from when they write about things like GAB, which, as I said, GAB was set up. I think the guy's name was Andrew Torba, I believe, and it should say in this article. But I mean, when he set it up, it was just for free speech. Now, yes, a lot of racists and Nazi type people did go to GAB, They didn't go to GAB because GAB is a Nazi racist site. They went there because it trumpets free speech. And Twitter and Facebook ban them because they do not promote. It's not promoting, it's allowing, is what it is. It's allowing, whether you're going to have a platform where all ideas can be voiced. Both Twitter and Facebook um, tout that idea that they promote the expression of all ideas. But then when somebody is on there and spouts some crazy neo-Nazi um, white nationalist crap, they ban them. So where else are they going to go but a place like Gab? Imagine it like an open market, okay? Like an open square. There's two other open squares alongside this one. Um, Two of them only don't allow you to say whatever you want. The third one allows you to say anything as long as you don't talk about killing people, and that is a fault of Gabs. They should have been better. They should have been far more strident in searching out direct calls for violence. That was their one failing, their only failing, in my opinion. But so there's the third square that allows total free speech, except for violence. Um, is it the fault of the third square because bad people also flock there? Um, does that make the square itself bad? I don't think so. I don't believe that, and I think it's actually Facebook's and Twitter's fault that something like Gab got so overrun with Nazis and others, because I mean, it, if you really want to stop a bad idea, the only way to do it is with good ideas, and the only way to do it is by hearing out the bad idea. Like, I don't understand what they're afraid of. They're so, they're terrified of Nazi ideology. Why? If it's so bad and so stupid and so wrong, then you should have no fear of it. You should just challenge it with the truth and with your own ideas. You would think that the left, the progressive left, would have the confidence to do that, but they don't. Anything they don't like or they don't understand, they just ban, flat out ban. Um, which is just, I mean, amazing, because they promote themselves as the tolerant, open-minded ones. They're the exact opposite of that. That's why GAB even came into existence, because the progressive left on Facebook and on Twitter, um, they forced GAB into existence. Um, and I mean, it wasn't just Nazis and white nationalists that were getting banned off Facebook or Twitter. Like I said, it was people like Milo Yiannopoulos. I know. There's a lot of people over there at Vox and at Vanity Fair and these other places that label Milo Yiannopoulos a white nationalist, a racist, and a bigot. But only an idiot really believes that. Try listening. I read his book, the book that he wrote, that was um, that he lost the book contract with Simon and Schuster over. Um, I think it was called Dangerous. The guy is not a white nationalist. I've listened to countless hours of his stuff on YouTube. I was a subscriber to his podcast when it was going. I've read some of his articles on Dangerous. He's not a white nationalist. Gavin McInnes is not a white nationalist. He's not a racist. None of these guys really are. It's a total intellectual laziness on the part of the left that even trumpets that fact. Um, but I'm kind of rambling about this now. I want to get to the article, because the article, like I said, there's an article. It's called "Gab's Demise is Just the Beginning of a Horrific New Era, a horrific new era of far right." And this is by Vanity Fair, and it is actually a fascinating view from their side. It was published by Tina Nguyen, Nguyen. I never am good at pronouncing Vietnamese last names. I believe that's what it is, but Tina Nguyen. Um, On October the 29th, 2018 at 5:09 p.m., she published this lovely masterpiece. Um, I just want to read through it because, as I said, it is fascinating to really get an idea of how ill-informed these mainstream media really is of what the right is. They still call people like me or Milo Yiannopoulos or Ben Shapiro or Gavin McInnes, they still call us alt-right. You know, Gav's demise is just the beginning of a horrific new era of far right. You know, what is the far right? I know what alt-right is. Alt-right started out as what we would call the far right now, and it quickly deteriorated into the Daily Stormer and neo-Nazism. But anybody who didn't want anything to do with white nationalism or the neo-Nazis quickly abandoned it, and they're now what I guess is being referred to as the far right here. Really, it's just conservatism with a dash of political incorrectness, which is just conservatism and common sense, in my view. But let's get to the article. I don't want to drag this out forever. I'll just start reading it from the beginning and then skip through some of it. Back in the summer of 2016, in a world that never truly countenanced the real specter of a Trump presidency, the populist nationalist troll Milo Yiannopoulos was kicked off Twitter for harassing the comedian Leslie Jones. And you see how it starts out. The populist nationalist. He's neither of them. Well, he may be a nationalist. I'm a nationalist in the pure sense of the word. But a populist, no. I doubt she even knows what that means. But anyway, at the time, many wondered what had taken so long, or whether the popular Breitbart editor might see his influence in the darkest corners of the shit-stirring fringe of white-ring conservatism decline. Instead, Yiannopoulos announced a new social media comeback. I'm joining GAB today. My username is @M. Come say hi, he wrote on Facebook, adding that this new platform was giving out 10,000 new invites to celebrate my arrival. I mean, she's exaggerating a little bit. I remember when he joined GAB. He never used GAB. He very rarely used it. Anything Milo does, he does with a bunch of with pizzazz and a good deal of self promotion. So this, the idea that he was embracing it as some new crazy, scheme, or the idea that he was really tied with GAB is just not true at all. And she continues with this line of thought. Yiannopoulos' embrace of GAB was a coup for the nascent platform, then barely 2 months old, which appeared to be a better designed, less sketchy member of the growing universe of so-called, here we go, quote-unquote alt-right websites, including Steve Bannon's Breitbart News, Daily Stormer, and Vidaire, with their anti-Semitic overtones, and 8chan, the anonymous image board full of Pepe the Frog memes. Gab.com's logo was a cutesy little graphic frog face, a seeming nod to Pepe, but described by its COO to Vice as a biblical reference to the plague of frogs, which would rain down, quote, revenge against those who went against mainstream conservative voices on the internet. And you see right from the beginning, this Tina girl's just trying to blend right from the get-go conservatism, far-right conservatism, the far right, with anti-Semitism, comparing Steve Bannon's Breitbart News with the Daily Stormer, and Milo Yiannopoulos with the Daily Stormer, which is a common trick on the left. Yiannopoulos is actually the Daily Stormer, if I remember right, wrote an article naming Yiannopoulos the #1 enemy of the Daily Stormer. They declared a holy war, I guess, or jihad against him, something like that. And Steve Bannon has no association with the Daily Stormer. They hate each other. They want nothing to do with each other. None of their ideologies mix at all. But if you did some research, you would know this, Tina, but you didn't. the allusion to Pepe the Frog, and it says right there why Gab chose the little graphic frog face. It has nothing to do with Pepe the Frog. It has to do with the plague of frogs, but she would never take that at face value. Yiannopoulos' own attempt at mainstreaming failed miserably thanks to numerous scandals and self-inflicted wounds. This is true, but he remains one of the most popular figures on GAB, despite, or rather due to, his reputation as a white nationalist sympathizer. Even without Yiannopoulos as a leader, GAB has become a welcome haven for his ideas, which in the following 2 years became a notorious redoubt for a wide spectrum of far-right pot philosophizing, from pro-Trump nationalists to outright white supremacists and neo-Nazis. The site soon grew a small but steadfast following, increasing its membership virtually every time a popular far-right figure, such as white nationalist Richard Spencer, or MTV host turned Holocaust denier Tila Tequila, which I don't even know how the woman's not in a cage, got deplatformed elsewhere and moved their online presence to gab.com. It became a cause célèbre for anti-social justice warrior media icons such as Ann Coulter, and received increasing support from figures like Tucker Carlson, who drew criticism after interviewing Andrew Torba, the creator of Gab. Naturally, the backlash to Carlson's interview prompted Breitbart to accuse his critics of being anti-free speech. But in the past week, Gab has become known as the social media base for a man who committed what is believed to be the deadliest act of anti-Semitism in American history. And this is true. She's not making that up. The shooting at Tree of Life was the largest attack on Jews in America in history. But here, when she mentions naturally the backlash to Carlson's interview prompted, why was there a backlash at all to Tucker Carlson interviewing Andrew Torba? Who cares? I mean, in a world where all ideas are exchanged freely, and there is free speech, freedom of conscience, and freedom of expression, and freedom of ideas, even if you don't agree with somebody, and even if you hate their ideas and consider them repugnant and wrong, you should still give them, A, the right to express those ideas, and B, you would want those ideas to be expressed so you can challenge them. When you deny somebody a platform or an idea a platform, all you do is give it martyrdom status. So people like Spencer with the Daily Stormer, the neo-Nazi websites, and this Crower guy who shot up the Tree of Life and was downgraded to Gab, his own little haven there, the only place that would allow him to spout his nonsense. When you do that, all you do is further entrench people in their beliefs, rather than putting their ideologies and their beliefs out in the open where they can be shown to be as ridiculous and as wrong as they possibly can be. When you put it down like that and regulate it to dark corners of the web or whatever, then there they only fester. They are not challenged. And the people become more entrenched in what they do believe. It's the wrong way to approach it, and that's why free speech is so important and so valuable. And when you remove that, bad ideas merely grow. The left doesn't understand that. I hate harping on left and right, but it is true. The progressive left in America does not understand that idea. They can't grasp the concept that just because you hate something and don't agree with something, that it shouldn't exist. Or that it should, and you should listen. They talk about being tolerant all the time, yet they are the most intolerant people on the face of the planet. Further on in this article, this atrocious lack of investigative journalism, let's see. Although the site advertised a strict no-tolerance policy against posts calling for violence, self-harm, or threatening language, moderation was often lax, as well it should be. Eventually, members were evicted for much more arbitrary reasons. Prominent white nationalist Paul Nellen, who challenged Paul Ryan for his Wisconsin congressional seat, had a rich history of anti-Semitic trolling, but was banned for doxing one of GAB's highest-profile members. Well, doxing actually is a serious thing. It opens you up to assault. If people suddenly know your real name and where you're at, then logic would dictate that people that don't like you can go and then harm your family. So it's not a minor thing. It's not a how does she put it? We're evicted for far more arbitrary. That's not an arbitrary reason. Okay, just a little bit of information there for you, Tina. Being doxxed is no small thing. In turn, GAB's failure to enforce the rules often led to its own members to deliberately test the limits of its policies, practically daring moderators to ban them. Which, there's no denying that they should have been policing a little bit better, only strictly for calls for violence. There's no denying that. That was a failure on their part. But just because they failed in that area does not mean that GAB and the ideas around it in and of themselves are wrong or bad, any more than blaming Facebook or Twitter for the thousands and hundreds and thousands of school shooters who have had profiles on those platforms. Nobody blames Facebook when somebody goes into a school and shoots up the school, I mean, they may blame the policies sometimes, you need to be better at policing, etc. But Vanity Fair doesn't write articles then saying Facebook is a haven for school shooters, which in a way it actually is, because all school shooters have Facebook pages, do they not? But, that's the logic of a leftist. And when you use their own logic against them, they just scowl and ban you. It's absurd. The internal debate, the article goes on, the internal debate over exactly how much hate speech the community could tolerate reflects a broader argument within the right over how to spread their ideas throughout the internet, whether by red pilling, aka, okay, and this is where the article gets really funny, and you can tell she has no idea what she's talking about. Okay, whether by quote-unquote red pilling, which she describes aka as sneaking fascist, racist, or anti-Semitic views into larger society by presenting them as reasonable alternatives to apparently strident liberal voices, quote-unquote social justice warriors. Okay, so she just defined red pilling for us. Red pilling comes from the movie The Matrix, and the right has taken it up. Basically, if you're red pilled, then you've seen the light and you've seen the hypocrisy of the left, of the social justice warriors. You've seen their socialist tendencies, their authoritarian tendencies, and you've seen the light, and you've moved over and become a conservative, basically, is what red pilled means. I've been red pilled. I'm red pilling somebody. That means I'm telling them the truth. I'm sharing the truth with them, and they're starting to see the light. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, it's not this malevolent thing like you're putting a demonic spell on somebody. Okay, but she describes it as aka sneaking fascist, racist, or anti-Semitic views into larger society. By presenting them as reasonable alternatives. So it's like we sugarcoat it, absolutely absurd. I would love to debate her on that, on just who really has the fascist, racist, or even anti-Semitic views, really, when you get down to the core of what is being preached by social justice warriors, or somebody like myself who has been quote-unquote red-pilled. I would love to debate Tina on that any day of the week. And I would do it with the flu, and I would take a healthy dose of cold flu medicine. I would drink a bottle of it and half a fifth of whiskey, and I would still be able to walk up and down all over her. But the article continues. Let's see. Donald Trump himself is a controversial figure in this debate, with some on the far right praising him for helping to quote-unquote red pill the normies, while fascist activists accuse Trump and the far right of paralyzing the supply chain by providing a moderate alternative to full-on Nazism. Let's see. It goes on. Let's see. This is a rather long article. I would encourage anybody to read the whole thing. Again, it's called "GAB's Demise is Just the Beginning of a Horrific New Era of Far Right." It is a Vanity Fair article. Tina Nagayan, I guess, is who wrote it. And I wouldn't recommend reading anything else that she's written. Let's see. For anyone who followed GAB and is little surprised as... Let's see. And then she goes on to quote some people on GAB that actually praised Devours' shooting of Jewish people at Tree of Life, which is repulsive, of course, and those people should they will burn in a special lower ring of hell. Okay. GoDaddy actually booted GAB from its platform. PayPal, Stripe, and Join deplatformed the site. Medium removed GAB's account. Some saw these companies' hasty actions as hypocritical. Gee, I wonder why. Like, every school shooter has had a Facebook or Twitter profile after all. After all, they claimed, the tech world had known about GAB's... Oh, this is why they thought it was hypocritical. The tech world had known about GAB's Nazi problem for months and done nothing. But the swift punishment did not quiet the GAB community. On the contrary, it seems to have validated the far right's victimhood complex. Oh my gosh. We have a victimhood complex. Jeez. And one of the central tenets of conservatism and the far right is that the victimhood complex only leads to defeat, basically self-defeat. There is no embracement of victimhood in conservatism that I'm aware of. Nobody that I listen to or follow on Facebook or Twitter that espouses right-wing or conservative beliefs wallows for a minute in victimhood. It is without a doubt and very clear that conservatives are being banned on social media. If the acknowledgement of reality is an embracement of victimhood, then, I mean, there can be far-reaching consequences to an idea as stupid as that. Let's see. The site's remaining members and supporters soon rallied behind their founder, that would be Andrew Torba, painting themselves as casualties of another wave of media criticism. Quote, "None of you leftist lunatics are blaming the shooter. You guys can't seem to grasp the concept of personal responsibility," one user tweeted, in response to a Washington Post article covering the shuttering of Gab.com. "It's Gab's fault. It's the president's fault. It's alt media's fault," and on and on. "Everyone is a victim. Zero responsibility." This tweet was reposted by Gab's account. Let's see. Her article continues, but the existence of GAB reflects a larger trend on the right, wherein those banished from mainstream social media sites create ever more extreme platforms on which to express themselves. And this is where it gets really interesting. This is the end of the article. And in this last paragraph, it really sums up like where the left comes from in viewing us. Okay, but the existence of GAB reflects a larger trend on the right, wherein those banished from mainstream social media sites create ever more extreme platforms on which to express themselves. Okay, Fox News initiated this trend more than 2 decades ago. The cable channel was explicitly founded to offer a conservative take on the news, while Andrew Breitbart built his namesake site to cater to an even more conservative audience. Okay, so what they're doing is associating even the desire of like Fox News to actually be a conservative, to offer conservatives conservative news, a conservative news outlet. They're equating that with the far extreme fringe of people like on GAB that shoot up Tree of Life synagogues. Okay, they're tying all this together and kind of putting a dark hue on anything conservative that has broken off from mainstream media, and she doesn't admit that they've done. What she says is that they do it because they want to red pill people, and that's sugarcoat fascism and racism with alternate, like in acceptable sounding alternative ideas to mainstream liberalism. This is bullcrap. Okay. It is common sense that if mainstream media is becoming more and more liberal and conservatives can't find a place to get their viewpoint given to them or supported by the media stations and news stations, it is common sense that one will be created. Where there is a demand, there will be creation to meet that demand. That's just how the free market works. Other liberal magazines that pop up here and there. Vox wasn't there all the time. How did Vox get there? Vox got there because they found that there was a demand for liberal magazines and liberal news. So they met that demand. That's all Fox did. There is no sinister hue to this, you bonehead. It is just normal business. It is the normal world that if people have a certain viewpoint, they're going to want to see that expressed and upheld by others around them. Okay, this is just common sense. Andrew Breitbart built his namesake to cater to an even more conservative audience. Andrew Breitbart was a pioneer in a lot of ways. He created a massive media venture with Breitbart News. It's very successful. I don't read Breitbart News all the time, but I mean, I've heard a lot of good things about it. I think they do a lot of good work. To say that he just did what he did to cater to an even more conservative audience when the guy was a pioneer is just belittling, to say the least. But the article goes on. The bigger the internet has become and the lower the cost of entry, the more likely these sites like GAB.com and those further afield will proliferate, not just as social hubs, but as alternate internet with its attendant support networks. Already, far-right crowdfunding sites like Hatreon have popped up as alternatives to GoFundMe and Patreon, though they're frequently kicked off major payment platforms. Why? Why would they be kicked off major payment platforms? Well, Patreon actually exists because places like GoFundMe and Patreon remove conservative speakers like Milo, like Laura Loomer, like Gavin McInnes, and others. So if they're going to make money off of their videos like they were doing before, it would make sense that crowdfunding sites that would support them would have to be created. It's just the free market working as it's supposed to. This is common sense. It shouldn't be that hard. I shouldn't have to hold your hand through this, Tina, but that's reality for you right there. Where there's a demand, somebody will meet that demand and make money off of it. That's how Hatreon was formed. If you don't like the fact that places like Hatreon are being formed, then I would suggest you talk to your pals at Patreon and GoFundMe and talk to them and convince them not to just ban people because they don't agree with their ideologies. By insisting, the article finally mercifully ends by saying, by insisting that Silicon Valley is unfairly suppressing and maligning the views of his quote-unquote deplorables, she just assumes that Silicon Valley is unfairly suppressing and maligning the views of his of conservatives. She assumes that they're unfairly suppressing and maligning. I don't even know how you would say that with a straight face, given all the overwhelming evidence that is out there to the contrary. Saying what she said is almost as absurd as saying the Holocaust didn't happen. We know it happened. There is so much when a Holocaust denier pops up, it's laughable. Not that the two are comparable, but the evidence is just as overwhelming that conservative media is being suppressed and maligned. It's It doesn't take a genius. Even people in middle America who have very little to do with politics or the culture are well aware of this. They see it every day. I talk to people every day um, who really aren't involved in politics, from what I can see and from what they tell me, and even they see it at face value for what it is. Um, where the site it ends by saying, "Where the cycle ends is anyone's guess. But the story of Gab is far from over." Yes, thank God it is, Tina. Gab is not going anywhere, Torba wrote on the now defunct page. I don't care what we have to do. I don't care what it takes. We will build everything from the ground up if we have to. Um, as of the recording of this podcast, Gab is not up. I hope it does get back up. They're claiming it'll be up by the end of this weekend. It's now 8 o'clock on Sunday, so I'm doubting that'll happen. But they claim they have a new host, a new server, and all that, and a new funder. So that would be good news to me. My only advice to Andrew Torbo would be stay committed to free speech, but you need to do far better work at actually policing. And I know we all hate that word, but you need to be watching out for the people like cowards. And don't just ban them. Don't just do what Facebook does and just ban them so some other nutcase like the Daily Stormer can create a social media network that will pick them up. Turn them over to the FBI. Do what anybody with decency would do, and turn them over to the police or to the FBI. But anyway, that's kind of my take on the GAB thing. When it comes back up, I'll be joining it again, and I'll use it as an opportunity to, share the gospel with Nazis, who are really just people like me in need of salvation. That's all we all are. When I see somebody with that kind of persuasion or mentality, what first comes to mind is there, but for the grace of God go I. And that kind of humility should encapsulate all of us, including you, Tina, Nagayan. Instead of this self-righteous, moral grandstanding and virtue signaling that has proliferated the internet and mainstream media and thoroughly sunk this article itself. There was other stuff I wanted to bring up in this podcast. I did want to mention the very childish spat that went on between Candace Owens and Tommy Lahren over the Blexit, which is an amazing thing. I think Candace Owens has done tremendous work by creating Blexit. She worked with Kanye there, but the girl, Candace Owens, has a tremendous ego on her, and she is so petty and mean-spirited that she sabotages herself all the time. I remember when I was one time I was listening to Dave Rubin's show, The Rubin Report, and she was on there in one episode just bickering at the level of an 8th grader or a 3rd grader. I'm sorry to insult 8th graders. Bickering with this trans guy, really. Blair White, who's ironically kind of conservative, but they had some kind of personal feud going, and they were just going at it like two 5-year-olds, on who had whose ball or Barbie or something. It was the most childish, petty, mean-spirited, but yeah, just incredibly petty. Candace Owens, and then she started going. Yelling at Tommy Lahren, who's another conservative leader or whatever she is on social media. All this right before the midterms, and it was embarrassing, frankly. And I think anybody who is a leader right now in the conservative movement, when we're already under such intense criticism and speculation and focus, all it with a negative light. This is the last point where or a period of time, or this is the last thing we need to be doing is having these petty, childish beefs on Twitter. I mean, for a leader of something like Blexit to be going on and on like a 5-year-old schoolgirl on Twitter about Tommy Lahren doesn't have a career anymore and all this kind of stuff. And just, listening to just this raging ego about how, I mean, she sabotaged herself with Kanye West to begin with because her ego is so out of whack that she just couldn't help herself but to admit that Kanye had something to do with the creation of the logo for Blexit. Um, Black people leaving the Democrat Party is what the Blexit, play off of Brexit, Britain leaving the EU. I shouldn't have to explain that, but to anyone who doesn't know what it's about, that's what it is. Um, it's just insane, and it embarrasses conservatives. Um, I just wanted to throw that out there at the end, though. We've run way over what I was planning on recording. But yeah, I know Candace Owens and Tommy Lahren don't listen to this show, I'm sure. But if by any chance they do, grow up. This is not the time to be acting like a 5-year-old. Get your crap together. Nobody cares who did your logo for Blexit. Nobody cares about your ego. You're not a rock star. You're not a Hollywood icon. There's no red carpet for you, Candace Owens, and there never will be, okay? If you really care about the movement, shut the hell up and actually focus on the movement itself, okay? That is far more important than scoring brownie points with Kanye West or Tommy Lahren, who nobody even knows who that is. I don't know who Tommy Lahren is. I think Michael Knowles mentioned her once on his podcast, and I scratched my head and said, who is that? It's a woman with a boy's name, okay? Nobody cares. You guys just need to move past this. Um, Mercifully, all the mania and the hysteria will end on Tuesday. We can thank the Lord for that. We can only pray that by the end of it, the Republicans will have held their majority in the House and in the Senate. And we can also be thankful that my overtly political podcast will have come to an abrupt and merciful halt. I won't have to be dealing with this anymore, and I will return to the old format that I wanted to stick to, which only focused on the cultural issues of conservatism and liberalism and how they conflict with one another. So the midterms Tuesday, get out and vote. Vote red, straight red ticket. It is not an exaggeration to say that a vote for any blue candidate at this point, with everything as close as it is a vote for the gavel in Nancy Pelosi's hand. That's just a fact. Okay, that's not sensationalistic. Well, it is, but it's true actually in this case. So just keep that in mind. Like I said, after the midterms, which is Tuesday, so by next week I will be back to the old format of social issues. There is I'm going to finally do that episode on the offense of the gospel and how Christ, Jesus, and the gospel stands up to this social justice that is pervading the country and the church. There was a recent study of evangelicals, a poll that was taken of evangelicals, where many core questions about the faith were asked of them, and the answers were depressing and frightening, to say the least. But I'm going to go over that as well. Apologia on their podcast mentioned it. I went over some of the questions. Ligonier R.C. Sproul with renewing, I think it's called Renewing Your Hearts, with Ligonier Ministry. Well, they were one of the ones that did the poll, Ligonier Ministry. Albert Mohler was talking about it on there. It's really encapsulates and spells out the doom of the church here in America in a very frightening and real way. The church has to really, really, really wake up now. It's all fine and jolly to be rooting for the Republicans to win in the midterms, but without our Christian heritage and foundation, and without people knowing what that even means, it is not enough to just say I'm a Christian. I used to say that all the time, but my lifestyle was the exact opposite, to my great shame. and that's, in a lot of ways, I was just a normal American, and that's sad. Um, so, it's not enough to say we're a Christian country. Well, a lot of people say now we're a post-Christian, and I would agree with that on the whole. And we need a second or a third great awakening. We need a revival, a reformation, or what have you. Um, you can elect as many Republicans as you want, as many conservatives as you want, but if Americans don't even know what it means to be a Christian, then that really isn't going to solve anything. All it's going to do is kind of prolong the end. Um, anyway, I'll be talking about all that. Um, we'll be getting back to the old format. Um, the offense of the gospel of Jesus Christ will be the next podcast episode. Why social conservatives or social justice warriors are offended by the gospel. All right. Um, subscribe to Woke Nation on iTunes, on YouTube as well, and download the Podbean app. Um, leave a review on iTunes so this podcast will reach more people. Um, all right. Good night, and God be with you.